Hello, my name's Simon Ryder. I'm the technical director of Gatwick Production Studios here. From the initial development of the studios, working with my colleague Brandon and a couple of others we had in, from the technical specification of the studios and things like that, to the maintenance of them and keeping them all running, is pretty much my domain here.
Hi, I'm Brandon Knights. I conceived this idea to build this studio with my fellow director Alan Sayers. Yeah, I've been building this for a couple of years. This studio is a gold standard Dolby Atmos suite. We're very happy with the sound. Nice to meet you. This is Zach Smithson, one of my engineers that works here and pretty much lives here a lot of the time, mixing music, original music. We're very much into artist development. We were just talking about a track we produced recently for a drum and bass artist called AC13. The track's called Visions. It's available on Apple Spatial. Just as a backstory, this is exactly why we built this studio. AC13 is a great young producer, a prolific writer. He came in, I said, you need to come and listen to this room. We played him a few tracks. I said, think about this system when you're composing your next track, and think about the possibilities you've got. You know, you're not restrained to left and right, fitting everything in. Think about the spatial, the immersiveness. We were very keen to work with him because drum and bass and a lot of EDM, there's not much of it out there in Apple Music. So he came back a week later and he'd written a track specifically thinking about this system, and this became the track Visions. He brought in a load of stems, dropped them off, and myself and Zach went through. It was quite a lot of tracks, wasn't it? And we produced this track. Like I say, you can check it out. It works on normal headphones. If you've got Apple Spatial, Amazon Music.
The only two so far.
Yeah, they're the only two streaming platforms at the moment. But it's just a prime example of what you can do when you're thinking about Atmos, when you're writing music. And the whole thing opens up. We've just played it, and I mean, how do we approach that?
Well, yeah, so like being a mix engineer and producer here at GPS, we work with a lot of producers and artists and other engineers really just to help bring their artistic vision of what they want to do to Dolby Atmos, as well as like Apple Spatial. So with Jay, once he saw the room and went back to his studio and started producing, a week later he was like, guys, I got it, come back, listen to all the stems, and it's like a gig of just files of different stems, different instruments. So me and you were both like, whoa, okay, he's up for it, he's interested. And then once we loaded everything in, which is like, yeah, this is perfect for Atmos. It's got that kind of vibey, different like Foley instrumental tracks going on, moving around, but then obviously it's a drum and bass track that...
You should check it out. AC13 Visions.
So we had a session, us two, just getting it kind of in a place where we were happy with the mix. So that was a day session.
It was.
And then after that, AC13, he came to the studio and we did another day, 2 days with him, because he was like the artistic driving force behind it. At the end of the day, the artist has to be happy with the song. And so once we had a baseline of what we were happy with mix-wise, he came in and we have him like on the iPads and stuff, like panning stuff, like physically while the track's playing, and just like giving him the creative freedom where he's maybe not confident like on Pro Tools, but just enabling him to make cool stuff.
This is quite a unique experiment for us, because mostly when we're mixing music here, we're given stems that have already been organised. So you can really mix maybe 1 or 2 tracks in a day. But because this was an experiment, we wanted to really go in deep and explore the possibilities of how we could push the boundaries. And we've had a good response from people who were originally involved in the development of Dolby Atmos for music, who've heard it, who have said this is exactly what we designed Dolby Atmos music for. push the boundaries, object-based, things are moving around. It's not so much the Emperor's New Clothes thing, you know. You can really get immersed in what's going on, and it's hilarious to see people's reactions. I mean, you can see on here how many stems are objects and how many are moving around, and when you get to hear that, that's what it was built for. The frightening statistic is that 98% of consumers of music listen on headphones. Talking to Apple, the guy was over, and it'd be lovely if people took their headphones off when they get home and listen through a soundbar or an Apple AirPod or any of these devices which enable Dolby Atmos, which use reflective technology, because although it works well on headphones, it really comes to life when you're listening to a soundbar. You don't need a 9.4.1 system. You can have a soundbar and you get the very, amazing, it sounds like sounds coming from behind you, from the sides and everything like that. It's more of an experience than just listening on headphones.
It is definitely a balancing act, isn't it?
It is, and it's so much more accessible for the consumer now, because it's not that expensive to buy a decent soundbar, or a home pod, and they work.
Yeah. So when we're with artists here, obviously we love listening to it on the speakers, but in the back of our minds, we're always like, okay, how's it going to sound on the AirPods? How's it going to sound on other headphones? But like when you're mixing a normal song, you've got to try in the car, you've got to try in headphones, you've got to try in sound systems. But it is a balancing act between having it sound good on a soundbar and having it sound good in AirPods.
Well, first of all, we were building a live studio with the intent to put an immersive system in another area of this building. It's a very large space. I'd been working on the Pink Floyd exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum a couple of years, 3 years ago now, and it was my vision to do a really beautiful immersive space for playback. Dolby rolled out Dolby Atmos for music, so we decided to stop work down there and actually build a Dolby Atmos studio. This is before Apple rolled out spatial. That wasn't our motivation to jump on the bandwagon, so to speak. We were really, really keen to have a studio where we could create amazing immersive content to then be able to, to work across the board. The dream is to take it live. Well, it's not so much a dream now, that's becoming a reality, so to take it to a bigger audience. But this studio here is all about having the facility to create amazing original content.
So, in terms of adopting Dolby Atmos, we wanted to, we were looking for a format that was basically universal. Because coming from a live background, both of us, we put in so many systems and things like that, in sort of immersive ambisonic systems and stuff like that. And you put in amazing sound systems and things like that, and nobody had any content for them, and DJs were invited to maybe do a track or something like that, but they never did, because there was nowhere else to take it from. There was no reason for them commercially to do this. And we looked at Dolby Atmos and thought, well, this has some mileage, and obviously then Apple started streaming in it, so we adopted this as a format, because we feel very strongly that this is one of, it's become the new stereo. It is the leap of evolution that we've all been waiting for, and the difference between it and, say, something like, the older formats, Dolby Pro Logic or whatever, that were in sort of cinemas and movies and Dolby Digital, and is Dolby Atmos is in essence object-based audio. So each sonic object, which might be a track or a hi-hat, it might be a delay effect that's wandering around, it might be a violin. Each sonic object you basically separate off and encode with its metadata. This is all happens automatically. You don't have to understand metadata and how it decodes. And each object is then placed in the 3D environment in sort of both time information and spatial information as well. So it's very precisely located. And the magic of Atmos is the decoding platforms that are available everywhere. So whether it's a soundbar, whether it's a TV, whether it's some of the Apple pods, the Amazon Echo Studio, and or big sort of cinema amps, and now sort of people are getting into immersive systems in their houses and their living rooms, not just for cinema now, but for music as well. And also, most importantly, headphones. They've worked out a way to decode all of this information, the object's location and metadata, into various playback formats, so that what you are playing it on, whether if it's Dolby Atmos certified, if it's got that badge, it works out the combination of speakers to play that object through, to place it into the three-dimensional space according to where it should be according to the data. And they've also worked out how to do this on headphones, to do it binaurally. And you can basically move the sonic objects that have been in front of you, behind you, above you, below you, all around you. And it's very cool.
Take it to the big arenas eventually. That's our goal, to come full circle from mixing in stadiums all over the world, mixing music into left and right. You've got 50, 60 channels. It's down to you to get a beautiful mix of the band for the audience. You're constrained to left and right. It's a dream to be able to have all these separate channels, stems, place them, move them wherever you like in the audio spectrum. And also the dynamics that you're hearing on the radio a lot of the time, everything's squashed. You have to compromise with the sound of instruments. You have to cut EQ to fit them into the left and right. Now you just put them somewhere, so you don't have to compromise on the actual sound of the instrument, and so therefore dynamics is back as far as we're concerned, which is really exciting.
We were very lucky because we actually designed this room and this space from scratch. This is a purpose-built room inside the building structure, so it's fully isolated. To hit Dolby's gold standard of classification, you needed to hit certain frequency responses and certain SPL targets. So every single speaker in here needs to be able to drop to 40 Hertz, whether it's the overheads, whether it's the sides, the surrounds. Actually, all of ours drop to low 30s, aside from the front ones, which drop down to sort of like 22 Hertz. And you also have to hit the SPL targets. Now, to be a gold standard Dolby Atmos for music mix and mastering studio, every single speaker in this room needs to be able to hit and hold 85 decibels continuously at the mix position with 20 decibels of headroom. So it's got to be able to play loud. So you're talking about being able to play at 105, on peaks, and without any compression, without any limiting, and full bandwidth. This studio is also rare because it doesn't use any bass management. Bass management's where you can get away with smaller speakers and it routes the bass from those speakers to your sub, which is fine up to a point, but it does introduce time and phasing errors in your low end, because suddenly you've got your low end coming from over there instead of behind you and above you where it should be, and there's only a certain amount that anybody can ever do to correct that. So we approached this with zero compromises, and we actually built the room dimensions to fit the capability of the monitors. We looked for the broadest bandwidth, loudest, and most compact monitoring system we could find. All of those together led us basically to Genelac's door, and there really is nothing else on the market that ticks the boxes for us.
For our remit that we set ourselves to do, which was it's quite a mighty thing to build. The room is exactly the dimensions it needs to be, height, width, and length. For this, we've designed it around this system, basically.
So basically, we designed monitoring system and room dimensions in tandem together. So the whole room is a purpose designed to hit not just the frequency response, the SPL targets, but also the reverberation targets that Dolby set as in their gold standard. Which happily afterwards they sort of said, nobody else hits these. And we, how have you done this? And we literally just went through it with a tick box. And because we were building from scratch rather than retrofitting a studio, we literally designed it in from, every single step we went through. It just had to tick all of these. And we have a studio that we are absolutely delighted with.
We are. As acousticians, we designed our own all around the ceiling, this is all bass trapping. So this is soft material with various layers of different mass. We found it very, very difficult to buy acoustic treatments off the shelf, and like I said, as acousticians, it was a lovely challenge to design something that's beautiful, that's also functional, that hits and takes out the frequencies that we don't want. Constantly measuring with a very expensive microphone and software. We didn't just put stuff up. These cloud diffusers, which also act as downlights, take out certain frequencies. The bass trapping around the top these tree traps, bass corner traps, take out other frequencies, all the undesirable frequencies. So this is a flat room, and also it's been nice to incorporate some organic material, which doesn't take, leaves some ambience into the room as well. So it's not dead; it's just beautifully flat. So when you hear the speakers, when you hear the system, it all just comes to life. Very, very, very accurate.
They do indeed. We're not actually using it. It's very, very good. It's absolutely superb what it does. This is Genelec GLM alignment system, which has its own measurement mic for calibration and things like that. We did use it initially before we sort of fully calibrated the studio. It got very close. What we are using instead these days is we're using the full Avid MTRX, which is basically Digital Audio Denmark is behind it, and they have an SPQ card, which is a multi-output DSP card inside it, which costs an absolute fortune. And this whole system was basically aligned with an array of measurement mics around the mix position, so to basically capture where heads are likely to move to whilst in playback. So there was basically a pattern of 8 microphones here, and the response of the 8 microphones was then adjusted, averaged, and selected, and then every single speaker was calibrated and tuned accordingly. Although very rarely for us, the only EQ applied to any of the speakers is the center channel at the moment, because we've got an absorber that's due to come there that will take out those 2 frequencies, and then this will, having done all the acoustic treatments in here, this will unusually be a room with 0 EQ. And what the alignment card is then doing is it's actually doing the time alignment on all of the components. So for example, there's a bit of delay on the side surrounds here, which push them back slightly in time, which is the equivalent of moving them sort of like a couple of feet into the walls, which obviously we can't do. Time is distance, distance is time in audio terms. So if you delay something, it's the exact same as physically moving your object. Or if you physically move it, you can delay other things back and bring everything into alignment. So that's mostly what our alignment is doing in here, and very little EQ. In fact, just 2 filters applied to 1 speaker.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah. There's a bit of a beast at the front. This is a 9.1.4 Atmos system, which means you've got 9 around you, you've got left and right, you've got a center, then you've got left and right wides, then you've got the 2 side surrounds, you've got the rear surrounds, and you've got the 2 overheads. And now I feel like a flight attendant. And the exit is over there.
Pull the ripcord.
So talking about the front array here. So these are Genelec W371As, which are not actually subs. So they call them woofer stands. The best way to think of the 8351 there and the W371A is don't think of them as 2 speakers or 2 components. Think of that as 1 speaker.
It's a bass extender.
So it's an extender. It starts working from about 500 hertz and down, and filters off a load of the low-end response from the 8351 as the W371A takes over. And what it does, it gives you extension down to 22 hertz. But the main thing it does, other than giving quite a significant increase in SPL capability, is it dramatically lowers low-end distortion. So this is at sort of full, at full reference mix levels, this is below 1% distortion all the way down to 25 hertz, which is pretty much unmatched by almost anything else out there. The woofer stands do have they've got a second driver on the back, which can run in cardioid, which is a noise cancelling bass steering technology. But what you're doing there is you're applying a out of phase driver that's time aligned in with the forward driver to produce a cancellation going forward. However, the downside of that is it produces a bit of a time smear going forwards. So we're not actually using it in here. We don't need to. Our bass trapping is actually good enough on that wall that we've not had to use it. So we're just enjoying them in their
Pure form.
Pure tightest form possible.
And then you got the sub,
which is yes. So we've got the triple 15 Genelec sub down there, which is an absolute monster. It weighs 145 kilos on its own without its amplifier, and it was fun getting it up the stairs. That thing drops flat to 15 hertz, and it's got about 2,500 watts of RMS of power driving it. And it's a great room to watch a movie in.
Yeah, I mean for sound design, where you're literally using those sub bass frequencies to create effects, I can understand why the specs were so hard. We're up there but yeah, like I say, we watch a movie in there, or put some experimental music on. You can really use it. It's proper eyeball shaking stuff. Takes me back.
So we've talked about the monitoring system in here a little bit and the acoustics, and let's talk about some of the bare bones of what we're actually doing in here, how we're creating, how we're making it work, and the technology behind it. I'm going to talk about what we have, and then I might sort of mention what you can actually need to do to get into this yourselves, which is an awful lot more accessible than you might think it is. So we are mostly operating in Avid Pro Tools. There is also Logic on here and Reaper. Nobody's asked us for Nuendo yet, which is the only reason why it's not on the system. But if somebody does, then there would be Nuendo on here as well. But we concentrate on Pro Tools. It's the gold standard software of the industry, and it makes us very cross-compatible with the film world, music for film, as well as being in most studios, and a lot of professional engineers know how to use it. So, to that note, we're Mac-based. We are running a 2019 Xeon 16-core cheese grater Mac down there with about 128 gig of RAM in it, so it's a bit of a beast. We are using Avid MTRX as the routing system for all of this, and because of what we aim to do, ours is a little bit different than a domestic setup. We have an external Dolby Atmos rendering unit off in the network room over there, which talks to this system via a technology called Dante, which is audio over a network protocol. We send out 128 tracks or sonic objects from the computer here running Pro Tools to the renderer machine in the network room, and it bounces 128 tracks of audio back to us over the Dante network, in and out over Dante, and it compiles here. And it plays back through the MTRX system, which basically handles all the routing. So we've got two Pro Tools cards in the Mac. So we've got Pro Tools input to the MTRX, and then it also converts to Dante in and out. There's 128 channels plus an additional 64 channels on the MTRX. There's an additional 64 channels of Dante Virtual Sound Card on the Mac Pro, which we use for the other software systems. And the only other format we use here is AES EBU digital audio, which is how we feed to all the Genelec monitors. So if you're in the digital domain here and you start in the digital domain here, it stays in the digital domain. There is no conversion back and forth anywhere going on in this studio, so that there's no potential for any losses. Converters now are so good that you barely notice, but barely notice is not quite the same as not having any at all. So that's in a nutshell how we route, and we've got a couple of other things. We've got some Focusrite RedNet devices so that we can just plug in 16 channels of analog or in or out, or we can send off to another record format, or we can host client sessions in here. If somebody wants to do a quick overdub, we can do that in here as well, or a voiceover. We're set up to do that. walking through, we've got the dad-mom monitor controller. This is this talks to the MTRX. It's basically an interface controlling the MTRX. And from here we can select the various sources. So we normally have it obviously in 9.1.4, but we can bounce down, we can grab the binaural mix, we can grab the stereo crunch down, and then we've got various other modes as well for some of the other software. And we've also got facility to add some guest monitors if, you know, a visiting engineer really wants to bring their reference stereo pair, or NS10s or whatever, or anything else that takes their fancy. We are able to add that in as a, you know, as a stereo reference, so they can just sort of check on something they're familiar with. This over here, this is another Focusrite RedNet device. This is it's a headphone amplifier that sits on the Dante network again. So it's basically our headphone reference, which also has a pair of record outputs, which got used for a client session the other day, where the client was actually sat in Germany, and we sent out, so we were referencing over the headphones, and he was referencing on headphones for this particular session, because he wanted it mostly for headphone compatibility. His market for his particular project was a massive classical orchestral thing, was basically headphones. So the monitoring was in headphones here, he was monitoring over there. We sent the identical signal from the headphone mix that's got a couple of line outs into a sound card, and just bounced it straight over the internet to him, and we were able to do a complete live client session in here with full notes taking and interaction from 7,000 miles in between. There's a piece of software called Audio Movers that enables that to do, and it's a very useful thing just for, you know, having people in other countries sitting on sessions with you and being able to work genuinely collaboratively at the same time with them.
Well, we literally started from scratch, as Simon's already mentioned. So we had outside of this room, we're in a big space. So the initial build, I think, took about 3 months, and then we started putting the equipment in, measuring, putting the various acoustic treatments in, measure.
Yeah. It took us slightly longer to build than normal, because we were in the middle of lockdown, and there were limits of how many people could work in the space. Getting hold of some supplies took a long time. Stuff took a long time from ordering. For example, you know, most manufacturers had supply issues at that point. So our Genelec speakers arrived nearly a year after we actually ordered them. So it was actually a very protracted build on this, purely due to the fact it was COVID lockdown.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, this is before Apple had rolled out the streaming, the spatial streaming format. We were just really keen to be one of the first to build a serious studio for creation content. It was well worth the wait, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
I think all in all, if you added all the time up, it would probably be actual physically working on building it, probably about 5 or 6 months to get it from nothing to building the shell.
Yeah.
I mean, the walls are this thick all around us. There's various levels of mass. There's air gaps. Nothing can get in, nothing can get out. We've got a silent air conditioner.
The door on here is multi-layered. It's actually custom built, that door.
Oh yeah, pretty much everything's
built up
custom
of layer after layer after layer of different materials to basically take out the standing waves in its own structure. I think that door, the door's approaching 120 kilos or something like that.
Yeah, and then there's an outer door,
monstrous.
and then the oak floor is floating. Yeah, it's a serious build. Oh, it's not for the faint-hearted, you know. But yeah, if you were,
we had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, we did, and we're busy building some other areas out at the moment.
So much
as well.
fun, we're building the next one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.